Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Rebecca, and I am the event planner of Microsoft Reactor New York. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly review two items, our code of conduct and the event guideline. So code of conduct, we just ask that while you're part of the session, we keep the comments and the questions to a respectable on content level. We do not discriminate, and we try to be as welcoming as possible. So please help us with that by maintaining the chat. Thank you. This session is recorded. You will not appear in the video. If you have questions, please submit them to the Q&A. I've dropped a couple of comments in there already. That's where you can give feedback throughout the session and during our Q&A session at the end of their presentation. For closed captioning, to turn it on, you can go to your session settings, and we have it in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. So today's agenda, we'll be doing a brief welcome and opening discussion, followed by a business case on the company Laura and a Q&A at the end. Today's session will cover data-driven decisions as a key to developing a successful company. This event is part of a series of workshops promoted in partnership by IFC and Microsoft with the support of We Ventures and We Impact, with the objective of fostering women entrepreneurship. Our guests will walk you through their presentation and discussion, and then we will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So our presenters today and speakers. So Lana Graf is a data and AI specialist with a focus on venture capital at IFC, and Christian Roca is a co-founder and CEO of Laura. So please welcome our speakers at this time. We look forward to their presentation. Laura, Lana, whenever you're ready.
Of course, yeah. So thank you so much for the introduction. Good to, talking to all of you. So today our main focus would be leverage of AI, machine learning algorithms, leveraging data on data-driven decisions. So just a general overview of the market. I'm covering globally AI and machine learning and deep tech initiatives for IFC. We constantly screening companies all over the world, and especially with the focus on emerging markets. And the recent trend that we noticed is that more and more companies at this point coming to the stage when they are data ready. And if we call a company data ready, what in particular does it mean? 5 years ago, that was a problem. You can ask any type of engineer if the data is clean, if you can literally use it, if it's, like available for analytics. Looks like over the past 2 years, it was significant developments in terms of how customers, how users, how managers, decision-making units operates with the data. Data became more clean. And now the next step, like, what do we do with that? Obviously, of course, we can use that for data-driven decisions, and that would be the main core, like for us, we can use it for improving the quality of our products and our operations. And the most important part is it literally locks of like not using data 20-30% sometimes of margins. And I have a very interesting numbers for you. For example, global investment in AI plans to be over 119 billion by 2024. It's like more than doubled from what we have right now. And what does it even mean? So we have IDC Artificial Intelligence Spending Guide that was providing that data, and they were analyzing a bunch of research done by McKinsey or Dimensional Research. They are saying because companies adopting AI on average 10% more profitable, we would give it as a general recommendation to have it as a core for business development. We are not talking here even about technology group or CTO responsibility or CIO. It looks like it becoming like a general business problem or business target on how to use data for organization. What I've been seeing through my practice at IFC, and when we do a lot of due diligence to companies, this is of course a technological question, so if the data is ready, how data lake structured, how expensive it is to run, like off cloud, on cloud, etc. There are multiple questions that we are covering with the companies, seeing how their operations set up, etc. But then, like over the last 2 years, as I said, we started to talk about data more with business people, with operations people, or with product people. So it was a fascinating turning point when all the like AI and ML professionals, such as myself, started to realize and literally be able to talk with business people about how to unlock potential leading data. And there are multiple applications. For example, you do decision making based on data. Of course, sometimes it's just like basic BI tools or like BI tables, dashboards, whatever that literally show you what exactly is going on within your company. So this is like operational trends. But today, and I'm like soon we'll turn over to Christian in this case, how do we use it for, like even providing services? And this is so important trend that you can have your data sets. Of course, you can improve your automation, like internally, externally with your clients. But what is data is exactly your product. Like what do you do about that, and how you can bring a lot of good things, non-biased things, safe things with AI. So there are multiple questions that usually raised around like AI and data used in a product that touches, like someone's life or someone's, business behavior. And here is like 3 things. How biased is AI, how good is model, and if it's like really efficient, if it's really helpful. And, like our use case today is LoRa AI is like extremely charged with AI and machine learning robot that literally helps saving like millions of lives within healthcare infrastructure. So I'm turning over with that to Christian. So Christian, you are happy to share your slides and describe a bit, your business case, and kind of looking forward to hear and maybe to discuss with the auditory about that.
Great. So thank you very much for the introduction, Lena. And just for talking a little bit more about data, and I think you're totally right. Data is very important nowadays. And everyone talks about how you can have data-driven decisions, but that is still very hard to do. Even though you have a lot of data, you have to have a lot of data processing steps. You have to have a data-driven vision for pre-processing your data, and the data has to be the core of every decision. There are many companies that are starting to use the data sets and a data-driven strategy more and more. And with the more availability of data that we have nowadays, this is a trend. And of course, you can have data for everything. You can have data for improving your product, for looking what parts of your product you can improve. You can use data for building strategy as well, for building business strategy. And you can also have the use of data-driven decisions for measuring your results with OKRs, for example. Objectives and key results is another methodology that you can use data-driven decisions. But one thing that I'd like to point out for you guys here in this talk today is the use of data for a good cause. and I will talk about how here we at LoRa we use data for empowering the healthcare teams in Brazil to better understand what is the real situation of their patients in hospitals. So I will talk a little bit about the problem that the nurses and the physicians have every day, and moreover, I will talk how we use data for empowering the services that they do every day. So I try to share my slides here. If you can move for the next slides, just 1 second. Yeah, okay, so I think I'm presenting my slides right now.
Yep, we can see it. Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rebecca. So just talk a little bit about LoRa. We are a health tech startup here in Brazil. We have started our services here in 2016. And throughout this time, we have analyzed more than 8 million medical records here in Brazil. And our main value proposition is to help the healthcare team in hospitals to understand what is the patients at risk. And I will talk a little bit more about it. And actually, nowadays we have products that can take care and can help the physician, the healthcare team to early detect the patients at risk on every point of the patient journey, starting in the primary healthcare when the patient starts to have the first symptoms, where we use data to better understand on how what's the best healthcare service that patient can have, and if that patient is a patient at risk, and if we recognize it, we can follow that patient for the hospital to the hospital, where in the hospital we provide a clinical decision support system for the healthcare team, where they have smart alerts for early recognizing what are the patients at risk in real time. And we also use data for helping the healthcare team on the post-treatment of the patients. On after they have discharged from the hospitals, we help them on the digital and remote monitoring. But today I would like to talk more about the clinical intelligence side, on how we use data for empowering the decisions that the healthcare team have in hospital settings. And I will talk about the problems that they have as well. So when you are in the hospital, there's a problem that many healthcare teams face here in Brazil. Most of the time, you have a reduced healthcare team with 4 to 5 people to take care of 30 to 40 patients at the same time. So you can imagine that it's very hard to early identify, early recognize what are the patients at risk. You have information coming from many different sources. You have information from the electronic health record, you have data from the laboratory information system, and each person in the healthcare team has a piece of information of the patient, a piece of data that if you don't connect that data, maybe you will identify. Can you see the presentation, guys? It's not on my window. Okay, it's here. So that's the problem that the healthcare teams they have every day. They have a lot of data and they have a lot of other things to do. And the big question is, how can you connect that data to early identify what are the patients that are the highest risks? So that's a very important point. Here we have the specification of clinical deterioration, that is a serious physiologic disturbance that if you don't early identify it, patients can die in just a few hours. So when you are in the hospital settings, if you don't identify what are the patients that are at the highest risk, you can have real problems to take care of that patients afterwards if you have a long time to identify that patients. So the other problem is how long until the patient is to identify, and what you're going to do with that patient, how long until the patient is being treated, and how to understand it. So when we think about the hospital settings, in general, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of information which is fragmented, and if you cannot connect the data, you don't know what's happening. So here we have the patients at risk, and when we think in the health overall, actually the health is a derivative of time. So everything you do right now, it's gonna affect your health in the near future. So when we think about a patient at risk in hospital, you have to early recognize that patient. You have to register that information, and you have to communicate it to someone. And in general, a patient that is at highest risk, at a high risk in the hospital, you have to connect that patient to the rapid response team. And afterwards, you have to know what's going to happen to that patient. If you're going to transfer that patient to the ICU, or if you're going to start a treatment with antibiotics, or if you're going to keep that patient in the wards. So the general view here is that you have a lot of data coming through, and you have the patient at the center, but you have a lot of things to do as a physician or a nurse in the healthcare team. So how are you going to take care of all the patients at the same time? So if you have 40 patients to take care, how you're gonna how you know what patient you're gonna look now, how you're gonna know what patients you're gonna look next. So that's the real problem. And when you cannot connect this data, you really can have trouble to take care of the patients appropriately. So here, one thing that the hospitals have is that the data is usually disconnected. You don't have the connection of data, and you have different sources. The data is fragmented everywhere. So you have data in different data points with sometimes and most of the times actually the hospitals, they don't have a data lake or a data framework for connecting data. And you have a low accuracy early warning system. So what does it mean? In general, the hospitals, they have trouble to early recognize what are the patients at risk, and usually the systems that they use for early identifying the patients, they have low accuracy. So most of the times when they have alerts about a patient, that alert is a false positive. It was not an appropriate alert. So they have problem with this type of false positive alert. And also they have communication errors. So if you cannot connect data, if you have a low accuracy early warning system to early identify what are the patients at risk, and if you have communication errors, how you're gonna use all the data, all the information that you have to have the appropriate escalation of care, how you're going to take care of all the patients you have. So what we have done is actually to develop an artificial intelligence system, a machine learning system, what we connect to the electronic health record of the hospital, which has all the information of the patients. So in the electronic health record, you have the patient history, you have the patient vital signs, you have the patient lab exams, and we take all that information, we take all that data, and we understand what is the profile of that patient. So, and what's the clinical deterioration of that patient? What is the risk of that patient? And we use that data for building machine learning algorithms for early risk detection of patients at risk. And that is a very good point on how you can wisely use data for data-driven decisions. Because here in that case, we use data from the electronic health record, which is connected to the laboratory information systems of the hospitals, and we help the physicians and the nurses to take the best decisions. So in that case, we help them to take data-driven decisions in hospital settings using the information from the patients. And with that information, they can have quick follow-up and quick intervention. And when you can early identify what are the patients at risk with a better accuracy, you usually have best clinical results for that patients, and you also have better financial results for the hospitals as well and for the healthcare systems. And how that works. So we connect our machine learning models to the electronic health records, which have, so we monitor in real time what are the patients with the highest risk. And at each data input, our API systems read it at every time. And then we process that information in the machine learning system, and we show it in dashboards and in apps and alerts for the healthcare team, for the physicians and for the nurses. And then they can take action. They can early identify if that patient is a patient which should be seen now, or if it's a patient that should be taken care. So that is an example, it's an application on how you can use the data that the hospital has to help the healthcare team, the physicians and the nurses to take data-driven decisions. And data in healthcare is extremely important because, as I mentioned, we have collected more than 8 million healthcare attendances in the last years. So with that data, we can build machine learning algorithms, and we can better understand what is the reality of clinical deterioration. And we can help the healthcare team to better understand it as well. And that's a very good point on how you can use machine learning for these kinds of applications. Here I show just an example very briefly on how we build a machine learning model with our data. And I will be very I will not be very deep here. It's just to you guys to have an understanding on what we did and how data is important for data-driven decisions. In that case, we show an application of an AI model, a machine learning model. So we extracted data from 6 different hospitals in Brazil, and we built these machine learning algorithms with data extracted from 2016 until 2019, and with more than 100,000 medical encounters. So this gives a very good perspective on what are the different types of patients, what are the different diseases, what are the different outcomes as well. And for the machine learning algorithm, it helps a lot for better understanding what is the universe of possibilities. And for this machine learning model, we got more than 7 million data points. So we always say that in medicine, you always take decisions based on evidence. And I like to mention that in machine learning, we also take decisions based on evidence and evidence based on data. So that's a very important point. And here what I'm showing to you guys is just one of the models that we have. We have many different models, but it's just to you to have an understanding on how these models are built. And usually the hospitals, they have different protocols on how to identify patients at risk. But usually these protocols, they don't take into account many different informations. So here we show a comparison of what data the machine learning, the artificial intelligence algorithms take into consideration, and the comparison with institution protocol. And here you can see that with the machine learning information, we take age, we take the hospital sector, the days of hospitalization, the ICD, which is the disease that the patient has, and the gender as well. And we compare all that information. We take the last 5 vital signs collection of the patients to better understand what's the real situation of that patient right now. And then we can give an alert for that patient if that patient is a patient at risk. And you can see here for the protocols that they actually just use one vital sign collection, and sometimes they use the laboratory results. What's the important thing to look here? With the machine learning algorithms, we can build strategies that are not going to be biased as the protocols usually are, because we take into consideration the reality of that hospitals, and we take data-driven strategies for reducing bias as well. And another good thing is that usually, as the machine learning algorithm is built with the reality of that hospital, usually the machine learning algorithm will have a better accuracy than the institution protocols such as MILS, PILS, or NILS. Here is just a quick example on what are the metrics. Here is a metric that we call area under the curve, and usually like the highest it is, like closest to 1, the better it is. So you can see here that the algorithms since LightGBM until Naive Bayes, they have a very good score, or under the curve score. And you can see that NILS2 and MILS, which are protocols, are standard protocols, are not built based on machine learning. The area under the curve of them is much smaller, which basically means that with machine learning, we can have better accuracy to identify patients at risk and patients that are not at risk. So here, as you can see, is the dashboards that we use in the hospitals for early identification of the patients at risk. This dashboard is built based on machine learning. So the alerts that you're seeing here is from the bed numbers from the patients. And then we have some information to show to the healthcare team what's the type of risk that the patient has. And here you can see an analysis of how the machine learning algorithm works comparing to a standard protocol. So here you can see that in every 100 deaths, the machine learning algorithm was able to early identify 12 hours before 88 of them, while the protocol could only identify 61. And for every 100 deaths, the machine learning algorithm missed only 12, and the standard protocol MILS lost 39, almost 40. And from every 100 discharges, the machine learning algorithm got 98 correctly, so almost 100, and the protocol got only 8, 9. So what's perspective? What's the perspective? The view that we have here, that the machine learning algorithm is better to early identify patients with high risk, and it's very good as well on the identification of what are the patients that are not with high risk. And that is very important because as a data-driven decision strategy, you should not have a biased view, or you should not have a lot of false positive alerts as the protocol MILS here has. So this is a very good perspective on how you can use data to better understand what's the reality of your operation. And here, just to show a quick overview on how it works, like here it's the app that's used by the electronic health, by the healthcare team, where they have access in real time to all the data of the patient. And also they have access to what are the alerts that the patient has. We centralize the data over here, so here the healthcare team can know what's happening to that patient, what are their vital signs, what are the alerts, what are the points that they should look at. And here is the base of a data-driven strategy for a hospital. So that's a very good point to look at. I'd like to point out some results that we got in the 4 years that we're working. So we have analyzed more than 8 million patient records in the last 5 years. And we have also analyzed more than 3 million patients. So that's a very good point. And we have also done a study which we are studying on what was the impact of LoRa on the mortality and the average length of stay of the patients. And we have done a study comparing how was that hospital 6 months before LoRa and how was that hospital 6 months after LoRa. And we have found out that after LoRa, we've got a reduction of the general mortality of 25% and a decrease in 10% of the average time of hospitalization per patient, which means that when you have a data-driven approach to early identify what are the patients that you should look at, so what patients you should focus, you can also identify and provide the better care, the best care for that patients, and avoid that the patients will have a bad outcome. And as we mentioned, with that you have a very good clinical result, and you have also a very good financial result. And well, we have nowadays we are in more than 38 hospitals and 23 cities, so that's a very good point as well, because then we can have an idea of how rich this data representation can be. Here's another example on how the data was very important for one of our hospitals for decreasing or for reducing costs. So here through LoRa, they have reduced the hospitalization time of the patients, and with that, this hospital estimates an economy of $1 million. So when they can have, this is 1 year of operation. So generally, when you can have a very good overview on what's your data, so what's your patients, what's the reality you have, then you can have a very good strategy for deciding what's the next point, what's the next step, what should I do. And this hospital, which is the Hospital Marcio Cunha here in Brazil, they got with us the recognition of a digital healthcare award in Brazil and Latin America for using data-driven decisions for helping the healthcare team on their decisions. So yeah, here is just to mention a little bit about our scientific presence. So as we are dealing with data, with validation of machine learning algorithms, every machine learning algorithm we do, every validation, we validate it with the research community as well. And one thing that I'd like to mention is that with our project, with LoRa, we have been recognized by one of the biggest artificial intelligence events that's going to happen in October in the United States, and they selected five projects of artificial intelligence applied in healthcare worldwide, and LoRa was one of them, the only one in Latin America. So for us, it's a very good thing, and it shows that we are actually in the right path. And as I always mention, LoRa is just a tool for helping the healthcare team on taking their decisions. So LoRa is a great representation on how you can have data-driven decisions for a good cause, how you can help the healthcare teams on the identification of the patients at risk and how you can make their work better through data-driven decisions and artificial intelligence. Well, so that's all that I had to say about Laura, and I'm happy to take the comments of Lana.
I think we have a few questions from the auditory, so it's
Wonderful.
over to organizers.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. This has been great. We do have a number of questions. This one's open to both of you. So depending on what, who wants to go first. So the first question we have is, any tips for early stage startups? What are the most common mistakes? Did one of you want to?
I think you start, Christian.
Yeah, great.
Sure.
That's a very good point, actually. And of course, startups do a lot of mistakes. I have done many, actually, and I keep doing a lot of mistakes. It's actually hard to don't do mistakes, but I think that I see is very common is that early stage startups, and usually the ones that fail, they fail because they don't focus on the right problems. So when you're building a business, when you're building a startup, you should focus on the biggest problems that you have. And when you're building a startup that you are in early stage, you are defining what's your core value proposition, you're defining what is your business model. And as I have recognized over the years here in Brazil, and mostly in the startups that fail, is because they don't focus on the right problem. In my view, an early stage startup should focus most of their time on the building of the business model, on the value proposition, on what's the problem that they are solving, and what's the unique value proposition that they have with their products, what's the type of revenue that they have, what's the size of the market, what's the addressable market, how is the scale. When you're building a startup, you usually have two very important points that you should look at. The first one of them is market fit. So you should make sure that the product you're building has a fit on the market. If you don't have market fit, you don't have a company and you don't have a product. But market fit is not enough. If you have a market fit with a very small addressable market, you have problems. So you have to look at market fit and distribution, scale. You have to look for a big problem and a problem that you can address with a unique value proposition. And that is a big part of the business model building that I think the startups should look at every time. Even we are in growth stage, in the scale stage, we look a lot into that because I think it's extremely important. And when you're building a startup, of course, you have a lot of problems. You have marketing issues, you have engineering issues, you have technology issues, you have people issues. But if you don't have a strong business model, then you have a lot of problems on the scale of your company.
Great.
I think I might add a little bit to that. So just since we are looking at the companies, like more broadly, right? Like there are different type of verticals, like not only healthcare related, like any types of that. There are truly very common mistakes when companies are so eager to go and get attention of investors, so they eventually started to put ahead of AI and machine learning too early. They sometimes do that on a very little set of data, just like probably not enough data, but still the model might be run, and guess what, like the result might be not necessarily right or positive, and etc. So this is like the first super common mistake that I see. And another part is actually somehow synthesized data. Synthesized, borrowed, got from open source, not enough, density and quality data might be used. This is the second biggest mistake when, you know, like somebody wants to play with AI and put an AI hat like too early. Other than that, I would say if company starts their operations and they starting to gather more and more data sets, imagine if it's an e-commerce, right, platform, or if it's a marketplace. Of course, you would need probably minimum like 9 months of operational data to be able to predict, let's say, inventory velocity or some type of alternative credit scoring for those customers and able to produce, you know, like expanded payments for them. So this is kind of somewhat just like everyone needs to understand and realize you don't enter, you know, like immediately AI stage of the company immediately from day one, unless you are particularly a DevOps company for AI, let's say building image recognition or some developing blocks. So that's kind of two common things that I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Lana, the next question is actually for you. So while you're here, could you describe at the end how to identify bias in our data models?
Okay, good question. So it's kind of more theory question, of course, but I would start it with the idea like what is bias, you know, like what actually people consider as a bias for AI, especially users, and what we are like as engineers or investor consider as a bias. Kind of more broad value for bias is like literally a mistaken result out of processing of AI. So wherever you run your model or you would want to get some kind of distilled result, it's just kind of faulty, right? So it's not correct. And that's where we are starting to talk about being under the bias stage of AI. What are usually our kind of customers or those who are users of AI thinks about bias? They also kind of quite scared about, you know, like some faulty outcomes, but as well, especially if we are talking about financial institutions, they're talking about bias like, you know, directed towards particular, let's say, race or gender or population, demographics, region, zip code, etc. So this is like too narrow to say. I would say there are 4 types of bias for engineers, and since we have entrepreneurs here on the call, I think that might be interesting. First, I would say if you kind of don't pick an algorithm properly. For example, you have different type of, you know, bias model. It might be high bias model, optimal model, you know, like high variance model. If you don't pick the algorithm correct, that of course like bias. So in this case, you definitely would need to consult with either an expert or be, you know, like an avid reader of a GitHub descriptions to be able to put that, you know, like right algorithm in place. So this is kind of simple. This is like more engineering wise. Another interesting type of bias I was really learning about during COVID. For example, like, of course, very unique topic these days, it's when you actually use your model on the training set that is not necessarily representing the problem. And here we are referring again to a bit of a healthcare. Imagine we have in our training set only elderly people over, let's say, 85, and they got COVID. So guess what you're going to have out of the data in terms of prediction with their potential death, you know, like, sorry about this question. At the same time, the population is way broader, right? So we need to be very careful about the data sets that we are using. So this is like the most common actually type in terms of bias. And that's referring to my previous comment that you might have synthesized data that's not really the mirror of a situation. Another thing, and that's where customers mostly, you know, thinking about, and that's where I started at the very beginning, is that, you know, like those biased, political bias, you know, like prejudices, any type of thing that might get involved in here, and that we most constantly see with picture and image recognition data. Because imagine there are a set of labelers doing image recognition, pre-image recognition labeling, right? So we might have, what example I could give with reference to healthcare here? Okay, we have a room of nurses, right? So like it's a bunch of nurses in there, and the prejudice in this case would be that all nurses are females. right? Of course, we understand that most, like 90 or like 80% of nurses, it's females, especially in the United States. I'm talking from my perspective. But when labeler will be getting over those pictures, they would put, okay, just like room of females, etc. So that would be, you know, like absolutely faulty bias. And we should see in this case how to mitigate that. Who are our labelers? Of course, you know, like how granular is that? How good are their parameters? Do they have human in the loop, etc. And the very last point for me on bias, this is low quality data sets. When you literally messing up with measures. Imagine we have some kind of a concert or public event, and that would be a picture with a few thousands of people standing in there. And instead of that, that would be, let's say, a crowd of people. Imagine like that is equal to 100 people. So that immediately would start, you know, like measuring problem that eventually got into the wrong outcome. Same, you know, like with all type of measures. I'll give the last example, not related to healthcare at all. Imagine you are trying to do a design of your room. And you putting there a chair, a sofa, a table, you know, like a very nice curtain, like anything like that. How important is that to measure all those inputs into that room correctly? If you have malfunction in inches, if you have malfunction in centimeters, meters, whatever is that, even just, you know, like different common type of measurements, that would be a completely horrible experience. You won't help your, you know, like you won't help your customer who are getting your data sets. You won't help, you know, like anyone who is trying to do their design on themselves. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lana. That was great. The next question's for Christian. So Christian, can you further detail the process of creating the tool? How do you manage the inputs? We can hear you.
Yeah, great. It's working now. So that's a good question. Actually, the inputs, they come mostly from the electronic health records. So what we do is to build APIs that can collect in real time data from the electronic health records. And then we read that data in our machine learning models, and we have the predictions. Usually in the hospitals here in Brazil and worldwide as well, the healthcare team, the nurses and the doctors, they input the data in the electronic health record at each time that they see the patient, and then that input after the insertion of that input, this data comes straight to LoRa, and then we have our prediction. And one very important thing to mention is that a problem that we have actually for the healthcare settings is that usually that happens in many hospitals. Sometimes the healthcare team, they look the patient, they take the vital signs information, and they see all the other patients in the same ward, and then they take around 1 hour to 2 hours to input that data in the electronic health record. That's a huge problem to us, because when we read that information, in some cases that information can be late 1 hour or 2 hours, and that happens a lot most of times when the hospitals don't have the right processes and the right definition on how to input the data. This is a thing that's going to be improved with wearables that can be connected to the patients and then collect vital signs in real time, but that's going to take a while. In the meantime, what we are doing is we actually developed a system that facilitates the collection of the vital signs of the healthcare team through an app. And in this app, we have a great UX where the healthcare team, the nurses and the doctors, the physicians, they can have, let's say, faster time to input the data. But most of our data, I would say 90% or almost 100% comes from the electronic health record.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This question's open to, I guess, both of you. Can data help improve diversity in companies, and how? Christian, did you want to start, or Lana, did you want?
I can start. That's a very good question, and I think that's another good point on how data can be used for strategy and for diversity as well. Here at LoRa, we have a manifest which is called the Maya Manifest. And in that manifest, we want to have 51% of women here in LoRa and 49% of men. What this means? We want to have more women working here than men. And why that? Because we want to have more diversity. And in technology it's hard. And here in Brazil, it's even harder to find women in technology. So we have developed a strategy of actually collecting data from our people and to see what's the percentage that we have from women and men, and to know what's the let's say if we have an equilibrium or not. And we have actually identified that we still have more men than women, and for that we are building more strategies for having more diversity. But of course, you can use data for having a better overview of the population that you have working in your company, and in that points that you don't have when you don't have many diversities, you can invest your time to improve the diversity side on the points that you should perhaps you don't have a very good diversity yet. But yeah, definitely the data can be used for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Lana, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's actually, I have a couple points. So what I see through the companies that we are screening, or right, I'm mentoring more than 2,000 companies. They are like technology company, etc. So what I saw in terms of diversity, it's not about, like gender, not only about gender. We were able to create in a few companies I was advising on people metrics. People metrics is a very interesting category when you put, compensation level, engagement level, KPIs, like gender, any type of, like political preferences, anything that, like employee would want. And then you run analysis on top of that. Turned out that it's like very visible for HR managers that, let's say, more people with, how to say, like pedigreed people, right? Like with amazing degrees from great universities, they tend to be, like on top of the, kind of food chain. And managers knowing that, seeing that, see that metrics actually can do something about that. And now everyone is talking, like about this gender diversity, but it's definitely not only locked into that. Another example is HR, like different HR tactics that are based on data and AI. When you have absolutely blind set of applicants, regardless of their name, regardless of their degree, they answering questions, let's say, on values, especially if it's important with like culture is important for some type of companies. This is also a very interesting approach. It's probably a kickoff in 2016 when you start, bucketing depends on values or some natural language processed phrases in their cover letters and etc. And only after, like it gets in front of the hiring managers, so you immediately eliminate, like all those very common started mistake that we might do towards employee. And the very last piece in that, okay, we hired, let's say, without, like bias, we set up compensation point also, let's say, without a bias. When we were doing an offer, it might be, like somewhat random or an equilibrium. But the problem is also going forward in terms of engagement, who is more, like outspoken, what's up with KPIs. And here is like, again, another challenge for managers. And I can see it, like even myself, we need to analyze every quarter, maybe like half a year. It depends how much stuff we have in HR. How is it going in terms of engagement? Are we overlooking some of the employees? They just didn't get enough exposure to deals or customers or etc. So there is also a tracking software for that. AI powered, it's like very much easy to set up. So I like definitely truly recommend whoever is setting up their companies or working in somewhat like that, please just like check for people metrics in the company. Like very interesting paradigm right now. Thank you.
Awesome, wonderful. And then, so that covers those questions. Lana, did you have some questions specifically you wanted to ask Christian?
Yes, yeah, you know, like when we were preparing this session and discussing with Christian what how do we tackle, you know, like that question on data, it is good to use data for a good cause, but also I'm sure there are some people might be interested in operations for the company. So Christian, if you could, you know, like spill some light on OKR or on any type of metrics, you know, like internally, that you leverage data even for internal processes.
Great. Yeah, it's working. So thank you, Lana. I think that's a good question. That's a very good important. That's an important point on how you can use data for operations. And I will mention how the OKRs, the objectives and key results, they may be important for having a better overview what's happening in your company. On the daily life, on the routine that we have on the company, there are many things that happen, and how you define how you're going to measure your success, and actually have many ways of defining it, right? You can have many different metrics, you can, but how do you really know that you are improving? And one very good point of doing it is to set up the specific OKRs, the objectives and key results on how you're gonna measure the success of your company, how you're gonna measure the success of your operation team, how you're gonna measure the success of your product. And here at Laura, one thing that we do that has helped us a lot is to really look into what matters, what really matters. Because you have a lot of KPIs, you have a lot of metrics, but what are the most important metrics that you have on your operation? Is perhaps product adherence, is perhaps monthly active users, is daily active users. What are the most important metrics that you should look at? So one thing that we have done here is to define for each quarter, what are the most important metrics that we should look at, and we have developed a dashboard where we can see the OKRs, the most important metrics of each department, of each squad, and then we can know how the progress is going. So we know how is the monthly active users of one of our products. We know how is one of the OKRs of the people success operation, for example. We know the OKRs of the sales team, and one thing that we always mention is that for OKRs, for example, and that should be done for all data-driven approach on how you can look to data. You have a lot of information, you have a lot of data, but for taking decisions, you have to look at the right amount of data. You have to look at the right metrics. In a company, you can have hundreds of metrics easily, but what are the most important metrics that you have? And I think for that, the OKRs, they are very good exercise on how you really measure your success and how you define it with your team. And you have a very good tool for communication, for alignment of what are the most important things in your company, what really matters, and a very good tool for measuring your success as well. So that's a very good point on how you can use a data-driven approach for the objectives and key results. Thank you, Lena.
Thank you. Very cool. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Christian. Yeah. Over to organizers then.
Thank you both so much. This was really wonderful. Let me just switch over the slides here. So Christian, Lana, this was a wonderful session. We had a lot of good audience engagement. I feel like between the business case and the overall discussion, we covered a lot in regards to AI and the technical aspect of, building out a company and starting up. At this time, though, we will proceed along. So we have part of this series, the next session is on July 28th, how to push diversity at the startup level. So if you're interested, if you enjoyed this session, if you want to continue tuning in, this is definitely another opportunity to review this kind of topic. And then we have on August 18th, how to do business with corporate buyers. So again, these two sessions are in English. But we do have the closed caption translation. So if you're interested in tuning in, do feel free. We check out our calendar. If you missed any previous sessions or you want to revisit anything that was covered in this session, we do have these on demand on our YouTube. I dropped the session links into the chat. So do feel free to check that out. I also shared with you additional information, our calendar on our main website, which you can visit as well, which is microsoftreactor.com. You can go and be a part of our meetup community. You can check us out on Twitter. We're always highlighting sessions there. And if you want to continue being part of the community, but don't want to have to deal with all of the web browsing, we also have a newsletter. We send that out once a month, aka.ms/reactor email sign up, and we send you just sessions that are coming up that deal on the developer and startup side. Yep, so that is it. Thank you to everyone that attended. Thank you once again, Lana, Christian, this was fantastic. We look forward to the next one. Everyone take care. Have a good one.